This is Corinne.
And this is Ayanni.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
Members of the Ton rejoice. Both halves of Bridgerton Season 3 have finally dropped. Corinne and I had so many thoughts about this latest installment of the Regency romance series that, just like Netflix, we split our conversation in two.
In this first episode, we consider the season as a whole and break down Pen and Colin's long-awaited transition from friends to lovers.
If this was your favorite season of Bridgerton, let us know on Instagram or Threads at SexLoveLit and on Tumblr at SexLoveLitPodcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to and rate our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
And if you have a moment, leave us a 5-star review. It can really help convince people to check out the show.
All right, let's dive in.
Hello, gentle listeners. Welcome to another episode of Sex, Love, Literature. We are so excited today because we are going to be covering Bridgerton Season 3.
Yes!
Woot! So this is exciting for us because we have been talking about Bridgerton in one sense or another since pretty much we've started the show, right? I think we talked about Bridgerton Season 1, our 6th episode?
Yeah.
Out the gate.
I went back and listened to our Queen Charlotte episode and then our Bridgerton Season 1 episode. And we didn't even have, like, the intro to the podcast set yet.
Oh, wow.
We just had, like, hello, this is Sex, Love, Literature. This is Corinne and Ayanni. Boom. That was it.
We had to evolve a little bit. Like, these things take time.
They do.
And then we did Season 2 kind of in the mix with other kind of Regency romances.
Yeah, we didn't do an episode specifically on Season 2, which now I'm kind of wishing we had. But anyway, we're here now for Season 3.
Yes, and we, as always, have a lot to say, especially, about, like, the sexy things that are happening in this season. However, first things first, though, I have a bone to pick.
All right, what bone, Ayanni?
Corinne and I talked about this a little bit, and I think it's deeply hilarious that somebody decided that when the Netflix logo for Bridgerton comes up, there is a bee. Like, the bee killed a daddy, and now every episode, it's there in the logo.
So thinking back,
that's really
I remember seeing articles from the first season of people being like, "Oh, the bee is it's an Easter egg, an Easter egg of death." Like, what? It's like, so I have a severe peanut allergy, and I texted Ayanni, and it's like if we decided to put a peanut in the SLL logo for some reason. Like, by the way, could kill Corinne. Ayanni has lost the power of speech.
I have, because Easter egg of death took me out. That's funny. Ooh. But no, I'm just flabbergasted that they were like, yep, bee. Because also it's not just that it could kill them, but, like, the trauma of Season 2 was all because of bees.
Yep. Anyway,
so,
Bridgerton, confused a little bit about what things are important to dwell on.
I was gonna say, Netflix design team, I have some questions. But before we dive into Season 3 proper, leaving my gripes about bees aside, why don't we do a round of What's Sparking Joy? So, Corinne, what is What's Sparking Joy?
So, What's Sparking Joy is when we talk about something that we are watching, reading, or listening to that is currently sparking joy for us. So, Ayanni, what is sparking joy for you?
Ooh, guess this. It's a book. A book is sparking joy for me.
Wild.
I know. I'm very proud of myself. So I'm currently reading Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. And admittedly, I'm reading it very slowly because I've been taking my time, I think, with books. I haven't read that many this year, but I've been enjoying the ones that I've read. And this book is a really interesting one. I'm enjoying it a lot. To give a very quick plot synopsis, it is about a young Chinese American girl named Lily who lives in Chinatown in San Francisco. It takes place in the 1950s, and it's kind of about her queer awakening, let's say, with one of her classmates and kind of this community of queer women that she comes in contact with around this nightclub called the Telegraph Club. But I'm, of course, like making my way through. I think I'm finally more than halfway, but there's a lot of interesting conversations kind of about the 1950s and about being Chinese American, about, you know, living in one place for a very long time and feeling trapped. And of course, kind of the through line of like what it meant to be a queer person in the 1950s. So I'm really enjoying it. A lot of it is kind of so lush and gorgeous to read through. Like, I'm just really enjoying the experience of reading it, if that makes sense. And also, Lily not realizing that she's gay is very funny to me sometimes. It's like, girl, nobody straight looks at people's ankles or another woman's ankles that.
So I've taught last night at the Telegraph Club a few times, and I always ask my students, like, at what point, like, if you didn't look at, like, you know, the inside cover synopsis, at what point did you realize Lily was gay? And my students are always like, the first page. Immediately.
Yes.
Like, talk about the female gaze.
Right? And it's like, I don't know how she didn't know. Everybody else knew reading it, right, on the outside. But of course, you know, she's in the 1950s. It's a different time. You know, it's not 2024. So last night at the Telegraph Club is really sparking a lot of joy for me. I'm a little stressed because she and her friend just had a conversation about how, like, wow, we've been sneaking out to go to this club, like, a lot, and it's getting normal now, and nobody knows. And I'm like, God damn it. If y'all didn't say anything, this could have been fine. But so I'm a little stressed for these babies, but I'm really enjoying it. And thank you, Corinne, for telling me to read it for reasons.
Yeah, so in case anyone else would like to read something that we may or may not do an episode on in the near future, Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. It's a good read.
You don't want to commit to it? You want to say may or may not?
I like to maintain a sense of mystery.
Oh, okay, that's what it is, mystery. Got
also,
it.
like, okay, because I went back and listened to our Bridgerton episode, that was at the point where we, like, tried to make promises about what we were going to do episodes on, and had been promising for several episodes that we were going to do one on Schitt's Creek.
Yeah.
So I tried not to make we did eventually. Well, like, I remember you said in that episode that we will drop an episode on Schitt's Creek by the end of the month, and we did on January 31st.
Kept the promise, though. That is the end of the month.
But anyway, yeah. All right, so what's sparking joy for me is a surprise, a Chinese drama called Meet Yourself, or at least that's the English title. It aired in early 2023. It is surprisingly a contemporary slice of life drama. I think it kind of falls into the category.
Question mark?
Surprisingly that I liked it, because I almost exclusively like historicals and fantasy dramas. And normally contemporary Chinese dramas don't do it for me. But this one did, because it's not really over the top. It's a very, very understated drama, and it moves very slowly and has a lot of characters that I enjoyed spending time with.
Oh, okay.
So the setup is this young woman in her early 30s in Beijing has been working in the hotel industry for a number of years, and she and her best friend keep meaning to, like, take this trip together and see each other more, and they don't see each other that often. And then her best friends come to visit her, and it turns out that her best friend has stage 4 terminal cancer.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but this also happens in the first episode. So basically
that's fine.
But they have this whole conversation about, like, what are we doing with our lives? Like, all we do is work. Like, we don't have partners, we don't have houses, we don't even have a car, we can't even get a driver's license. And, like, Hong Dao, who's the main character, is like, I have worked for 10 years and can afford the same few meters of space in Beijing now that I could 10 years ago. Like, what am I doing this for?
Oof.
And then her best friend has cancer and passes away. So Hong Dao kind of has this breakdown, and decides to quit her job without telling her family and go on this trip to rural China that she and her best friend had been meaning to go on for years by herself. And she gets a short-term place to stay in this small village and meets a lot of people and sort of finds herself again and has this lovely romance with a man who works there who is trying to like start up the tourism industry to bring back industry to his hometown, because there's also this setup. I am going to keep this brief, but there's this pattern of people leaving. So people getting married, having children, and then leaving their children with their parents to raise. So there are only seniors and children in this town because their parents have to go elsewhere to work to make money to like have opportunities for their kids. But it's this lovely story about this really sort of beautiful ensemble of people with these interesting relationships. And Hong Dao is this really... She's a really good heart of the story, I would say, because she's this very, like, pleasant, affable young woman who's not really that outgoing, but is very, like, polished because she's worked in, like, the tourism industry for so long. But the way she plays it, especially in the first... So it's 40 episodes long. But especially in the first, like, 15 to 20 episodes or so, there's this sense... And I think this is why I kept watching it, that, like, she seems fine and together, but whenever anyone comes to this town to, like, stay in this courtyard, because they have to take a lease for a minimum of 3 months, everyone knows that something is wrong. Like, that they had to, like, run away from the city for some reason. And there's just this sense that she sort of, anything could, like, tip her over the edge at any point, like, whenever she, like, thinks of her friend. Because she's also grieving.
Right, yeah.
But doesn't really want to talk about it, but like really anything could knock her over at any point. So it is ultimately a very healing drama, but like that sort of feeling of like, what am I doing this for? Like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? What am I working so hard for? Was a very resonant question.
Yeah, I was gonna say that strikes to the core a little bit. It's interesting. It was giving me kind of like Because This Is My First Life and My Liberation Notes vibes while you were talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's that same sort of genre that like, because watching it as well, I was thinking a little bit of the lie back and do nothing protests in China that I read about a couple years ago that was like this generation of like young people. So like, I guess younger millennials who like have been in this culture of like having to work and work and work and work. But for what? So there was like this sort of protest of like, well, people will just quit their jobs and do as little as possible. And Hong Dao like isn't actually that good at being at not working.
Not productive.
Like there's this very funny like, she goes through a number of things of ways she could spend her time. She has one day where she's like, yes, I am going to become a person who jogs. I'm going to go running. And she does it one time and never again.
I mean, valid. Jogging is the worst. So, like, same.
But it's a very good drama. I liked it a lot. I watched it in a week and a half. But, you know.
There were extenuating circumstances.
I'm also getting over a cold, so whenever I'm sick, I find I pick, like, a long drama and watch it very fast.
Yeah, but also you're a speedy drama watcher as it is. So like,
I am. I am a binge
crank
watcher.
It up, you know, so
it's like when I can't leave my couch, I pick some characters to spend some time with, and that's what I do until I am better.
Well, that actually makes it sound really delightful. But all right, that has been What's Sparking Joy. Very Chinese edition of What's Sparking Joy.
Oh yeah, I guess it was. So, speaking of characters that we have been spending time with, there are some others that we were happy to return to.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, like, Queen Charlotte was a really good foray into the Bridgerton universe, and so it didn't feel like we were waiting too long, in a way, for a season 3, right? Because we had Queen Charlotte in there. In my head, it kind of always felt a little bit like a season 3, but it has its own block in Netflix and all that kind of stuff. So I did not feel like I was waiting too long for season 3 to come about, though I'm sure other people don't necessarily feel the same way. But I think it was really exciting to return to the Bridgerton universe,
Mm-hmm.
and see some of these characters again, including our favorite Benedict, who is always fun
Yes.
to have time with. But this season was all about what? Pen and Colin?
Yeah, all about the pollen.
All which I know is like their little couple name, but of course makes me think of like,
Bees.
I wasn't gonna say bees, but yeah, okay, you're absolutely right. I think we have a theme here. So I think it's probably safe to assume that a lot of folks that are listening to this episode are familiar with Bridgerton, but we still like to give a little bit of summary up front for folks who maybe have not watched season 3 yet and are kind of listening to episodes and podcasts before they dive into the show themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start us off with a summary. I'll give kind of a general Bridgerton summary that we snagged from Wikipedia, and then kind of a part 1 and part 2 summary that I snagged from the Wiki Fandom website. So, set against the backdrop of the Regency era, the 8 close-knit siblings of the noble and powerful Bridgerton family, Antony, Benedict, Colin, Daphne, Eloise, Francesca, Gregory, and Hyacinth, navigate London high society in search of love, surrounded by friends and rivals alike. And so for part 1 of this season, because Netflix decided to split this into a part A and a part B for some reason.
I mean, an obvious money grab. They were conveniently released just far enough apart that you'd have to be in 2 billing cycles for your Netflix subscription to get both of them.
Oh, you know what? I hadn't realized that, but okay. Well, now we know why. Part 1, as a new crop of debutantes yearns to become the brightest of the ball, a wallflower with a double life finds her light amid secrets and surprises. And then part 2, if we had any question about who the wallflower with a double life was, Penelope sets out to marry while hiding her secret life, but as romance and revelations collide, she must choose between her pen and her heart.
And introducing some of our main actors. Obviously, Bridgerton has a huge ensemble cast at this point. Like, we get more characters every season, and there are so many Bridgerton siblings. But
so many.
So many. This season centers on the romance between Penelope Featherington, played by the absolutely delightful Nicola Coughlan, and Colin Bridgerton, played by Luke Newton. He is the 3rd Bridgerton sibling. Another character who we spend a lot of time with this season is Eloise Bridgerton, played by Claudia Jessie, who was best friends with Penelope, but they have had a falling out and has always been very close to her sibling, Colin. There are many other characters, and we will introduce them with their actors as they come up, but those are sort of the 3 mains to keep your eye on this season.
So jumping in with some kind of like first reactions, right? Though we kind of threw a little bit of shade at Netflix for the fact that they split the season into 2, how are we feeling kind of just generally about the season on whole, right? It's funny, I was talking to some folks when I went for physical therapy, and I was asking what their favorite seasons were. And I'm getting the sense that season 3 isn't necessarily the top season for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious where it shakes out for you.
So I enjoyed it, but I think I enjoyed it as a story about Penelope more than as a romance between Penelope and Colin, which is not necessarily what you want from what is billed as a romance show.
No, yeah. I agree with you a lot, actually. I found myself watching this season really tracking Pen's development and her movements and being invested in kind of her emotional up and downs more so than the emotional up and downs of the relationship. It's almost like it was Pen's story and Colin's romance was just a part of Pen's story.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
It does. Well, and it's so interesting so a lot of the reactions that I've been seeing are kind of split between like people who are like, well, I was not compelled at all by the Penelope Colin romance, so I just stopped watching.
Huh, okay.
And then people who are compelled by the Penelope and Colin romance are annoyed at how many other side stories there were and felt like there wasn't enough attention paid to Penelope and Colin's relationship and were annoyed by all the other side stories. But like part of the reason I enjoyed the show so much or this season so much is because I liked the side stories actually.
Yeah.
Like because I found Penelope and Colin's relationship a little bit less, I don't know, magnetic, engaging. I don't know exactly what word I mean there. We'll get more into that, I'm sure. But like because like I enjoyed having them on my screen, but I wasn't compelled by them. Spending more time with like Benedict and Eloise and her new bestie Cressida and Violet and these other characters was almost more interesting to me sometimes.
Yeah, you know, in a way I was kind of enjoying it more as an ensemble show.
Yeah.
Than I think I've enjoyed some of the other seasons in that way. So like I was really invested in like the Mondrich family and what they were going through. Cressida was actually super interesting to follow. So yeah, while I was rooting for Pen and Colin, and we'll come back to this, I think I found myself deeply engaging with other parts of the show more than just their relationship.
Yeah, the thing that made me like press play on the next episode was not always Penelope and Colin.
But it was frequently Penelope.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of in that way, like, this is going to sound like a silly question, but like, was this season sexy? Because I remember when we watched the first season of Bridgerton, and I know you went back and listened to the episodes, but I was like, we have to talk about these sex scenes. Like a dedicated look at how the sex is working. And and I have deep feelings about season 2 as well, and how very horny it was and how yearning it was. But I don't know if I've come away with concrete feelings about how sexy this season was, right? I think there were things about it that were.
Yeah, so there was still like, okay, I don't think that, to me it felt like we were missing like a final married sex scene between Penelope and Colin. Because we got, like, a moment of it at the end, but otherwise we just have, like, the carriage scene and the mirror scene, and, like, I just expected more.
Interesting.
I don't...
You know, Daphne and the Duke really set the bar high.
Yeah, like Daphne and the Duke set the bar high, and then Kate and Antony in season 2 didn't have enough sex, if I'm remembering correctly. And part of that was, like, the enemies to lovers, so they didn't have sex until very late in the season. So therefore, there wasn't just, like, a lot of time for it. But then Charlotte and George had a lot of hate sex in Queen Charlotte starting early. But, yeah, I just expected it to be hornier. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the thing about season 2 is even though they didn't have sex right away, like, there was so much mad, horny energy the entire time that it was, like, electric in a sense, you know? And that, yeah, okay. So... I don't know. I guess was it sexy is kind of an inconclusive question. But I feel like we're beating around the bush in a sense. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, it's not that... It is also that there are other sex scenes, because we have several, like, with Colin and some sex workers for some reason. And then, like, we have Benedict's exploits that, like, so there was plenty of other explicit sex.
Right.
But, like, I don't know. And we also didn't really... Well, so we're to give listeners some context for what we'll cover. We're going to start by talking about Penelope and Colin and then get into these other side stories. But, like, with the possible exception of Benedict, like, we really didn't get a lot of, like, sexy time from either Francesca or Violet, which I was kind of expecting.
Yeah. We did get a little from Kate and Antony.
We did.
Because, you know, they're making up for lost time from this season. But no, we'll definitely dive into those a little bit. Though I will say I'm not surprised we didn't really get from Francesca.
Yeah, because she'll have her own season, from what I understand.
Okay, so I kind of alluded to this, but I know we said we're going to talk about Pen and Colin's relationship, but can we start with Pen first?
Yeah, of course.
I know that watching this season, like, I've always kind of appreciated Penelope as a character, but I really just enjoyed how she was characterized. And, you know, I was going to say, and the acting was good, but there was something just about the I don't know. I kind of felt a little bit of kinship, right? She's a woman who is making her way through the world with her writing and with her voice. And there are people who want her to stop doing that, right? For a variety of reasons.
So for some context.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Because we have not yet somehow mentioned Lady Whistledown.
Oh, shit. Should we just restart then? Like, go ahead. Lady Whistledown.
But the whole thing that makes Bridgerton special is that there's this gossip column written by Lady Whistledown that makes waves constantly among the people of the ton and the marriage market. And we learn at the end of season 1 that the Lady Whistledown column is written by Penelope. At the end of season 2, Eloise learns that her bestie Penelope has secretly been Lady Whistledown the whole time. And then this season,
gets mad.
This season, there's this whole tension about like what is Pen going to do now that Eloise knows that she's Lady Whistledown, and with the Queen hot on her tail. So Pen has a lot of power as Lady Whistledown over the social milieu. And like she makes or breaks couples, she can make or break a lady's reputation.
Which she has done before.
Yeah, especially the Bridgertons.
Right.
We come into it kind of wondering what Pen is going to do as Lady Whistledown.
Right. And one of the struggles kind of at the core of this season, and again, I think this is why perhaps I'm finding Pen more compelling, is the difference between Penelope and Lady Whistledown, right? Are they... Is Lady Whistledown something that is separate from Penelope Featherington, right? Or is this persona that she's made for herself so inextricable from who she is as a person that, you know, they're one and the same? And I keep coming back to compelling, but I think I really just appreciated that through line and that tug of war that she's worked hard to create this very, very successful newspaper, right? Very successful newsletter that goes out that people are paying her for, that she's able to kind of create a savings for. And as soon as people start to figure out who is behind it, right, that she's the one behind it, that's when things really start to crumble and fall apart, and when you start to see the cracks.
Well, so thinking about why Pen then is so compelling to me, I think there's this question of what kind of life does Pen want, and like what paths are open to her, because she has some degree of power and influence and income, particularly as Lady Whistledown, but she is still dependent on her family, the Featheringtons, who are like a kind of nouveau riche family. Her father died for murder reasons in an earlier season, and there was like a whole scandal with go watch the first 2 seasons. I don't know. But basically in this season it becomes pretty clear that her mother has set it up so that the Featherington name and the title will be passed to the first of Penelope and her 2 sisters to have a son. Like that son will get the title. And as her sisters, who are newlywed or newly-ish wed, start trying to get pregnant, and Penelope is like, I have to get the fuck out of here because they are insufferable, and if I have to spend the rest of my life under the thumb of my mother and my sisters, I will die.
Yep. Perish.
So she has a new urgency to need to get married, but in a way that will allow her to continue to work as Lady Whistledown. So either a man that will be okay with it, or not notice that she's doing it in the first place.
And one of the things that was fun about this season is that Pen gets a complete makeover, right, in order to find herself a match on the marriage market after all this time. So brand new dresses in non-citrus colors, new hairdos, all that kind of stuff.
Her hair is also like a little darker red. They went more like auburn rather than orange, I noticed.
Okay, well, here's a silly question. Was it a Regency hair dye kind of a situation, or was this we're doing this as showrunners and now her hair is just going to be a slightly different color kind of a thing?
I think they were doing it as showrunners, but there also was like a long history, like thinking about like Anne Shirley and Anne of Green Gables. Her hair is like carrot red at the beginning, but then as she like grows up into like a young woman, her hair sort of like mellows into like a auburn color. So there is also like a tradition of that, I think.
A redhead tradition, as it were.
So Pen has this whole makeover thing, and is beautiful now. Also, like, Nicola Coughlan is always beautiful. Just, like,
Yes.
put that on the record. But now she's styled beautifully.
Right.
So, season 1, we had the, like, fake courtship situation. Season 2, we had enemies to lovers. This season, we have the time-honored tradition of the friends to lovers with Pen and Colin's relationship. So, how did the friends to lovers trope work for you, Ayanni?
Oh, that's a good question. I do love a good friends to lovers story, right?
Well, we did a whole, like, trope spotlight episode on friends to lovers.
We did. So, you know, friends to lovers is always a winner, I guess, in the great household of SLL, right? But I think, not to get negative right away, but I think the thing that they had to win me over the course of the season was that I left season 2 feeling like Pen deserved better than Colin. That Colin was overlooking how great she was, and that's a problem for me, right? Because it's not, in this case, it's not just friends to lovers, like two people who have been friends for a long time, and they're like, wow, actually, you've been hot the whole time. But more that Pen has been secretly pining over Colin for years, and he's just kind of been oblivious to that and hasn't considered Pen as, like, a woman.
Yeah, well, and it's not even just that he... Okay, so thinking back to our Friends to Lovers episode and that being sparked by us wanting to do that episode because of a show that didn't really do Friends to Lovers that well. One of the big questions in Friends to Lovers is this question of, like, what makes someone shift? What makes this relationship shift from friends to lovers? What is the catalyst here? And the catalyst has to be convincing.
Yes.
Yeah, well, there has to be an answer to the question, like, why now? Why not sooner? And their relationship just, like, felt so uneven to me because Pen has been yearning for Colin for so long, and he's just been so... He's been so dismissive of her. Like, I don't know how much I believed in their friendship. She felt like someone he was maybe sorry for.
Especially in season 2, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Like, he was but if you're friends with someone, you wouldn't talk about them behind their back in the way that he talked about Pen.
Behind her back in public with other men who would be of marriageable age. So it's not just like he was talking to Eloise, right?
Yeah.
There's a particular kind of poisoning the well that was, in a way.
So, like, I was hopeful that the show would be able to change my mind about Colin, because I really liked him in season 1. And then they changed my mind about Anthony from season 1 to season 2.
They did.
I disliked him very strongly in season 1, and then, like, came around on him in season 2. So I was hoping I'd come around on Colin, and I did a little, but I don't think enough. And I think that, like, I wasn't upset that Penelope and Colin ended up together because Penelope wanted it, I guess. Like, that's what she most wanted. So, like, if that's what she wanted, then like, okay, fine. Like, you go, girl.
Yeah, go off.
But I also, at the same time, that's probably, I think, part of why it never really, like, took hold for me.
Is because Colin wasn't convincing in the same way.
Yeah, and not the actor.
No,
the writing.
No. Yeah. The story, the setup of the plot, how they came together, etc. Right? Because since you kind of brought up the catalyst, right? It seems like there was if we're thinking about it, a twofold catalyst for this transition: jealousy and a kiss. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the conceits of this season, which is another kind of trope that I like, but like, well, I'll help you find a husband, right? I'll train you in the ways of men so that you know what to do, you know how to flirt, right? So in doing that, in having Colin help her, Pen starts to get the interest of Lord Debling, who's played by Sam Phillips, who is an older gentleman who does a lot of, like, what... I don't know. He's not an anthropologist. He's studies nature.
He travels a lot.
He travels a lot. I in my head though, he was a scientist. Am I making that up? Like
he feels like a naturalist, scientist kind of person.
Like he would have a lot of sketches of plants in his notebook, right?
Yeah.
So she gets the attention of Lord Debling, who seems like a perfectly fine man, who would care for her.
Well, and he's looking for a quote unquote traditional match so that he can have someone to look after his estate while he's on his travels. So
Mm-hmm.
he will frequently be gone for years at a time, but his wife will have safety and security and a fair degree of independence running his estate.
Right.
And honestly, that sounds great to me.
I was gonna say that's what Penelope was looking for. I think I would get too lonely years at a time. Like Andrew goes to work one day out of the week, and I'm like, come back.
Neighbors.
Work from home
You have
with me."
neighbors. You have servants. She would have Lady Whistledown. Like,
It's not the same.
okay. Well, it was not meant to be a love match.
No, right. It wasn't meant to be a love match. But Colin gets all jealous about the fact that Penelope is a charming, beautiful woman, and of course people will take interest in her when she gains the confidence to, like, you know, talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
So he is spurred on by that jealousy, in a sense, to see Pen as more than just, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
his childhood friend. But the kiss was before that, right? If we're thinking chronologically.
Yeah, so they've been spending more time together while Colin is teaching her to be confident or whatever. Also, like, just as a side note, that didn't quite work. It kind of worked for me, but it also felt like a retread a little bit of Daphne and Simon's relationship in season 1.
Interesting.
Of, like, Simon trying to teach Daphne about the men. But anyway, that's a side note. There was some, like, oh, I know. I remember what happens. It becomes public knowledge that Colin is helping Penelope.
That's right.
So Penelope thinks she's never going to be able to get married and that everything is ruined and that she's never going to get to kiss anybody ever. So when Colin, like, comes to check on her, she, like... Okay, actually, I had a problem with this scene. I will tell it in a way that I had a problem with it.
Go for it. Ooh, I'm ready.
Well,
I'm ready.
Well, because so she asks Colin to kiss her because she's afraid she'll die without ever having kissed anybody.
Uh-huh.
And he does. But that then makes him... And then it, like, you know, opens his mind to, like, the possibility of Penelope being sexy or whatever.
Kissing her again. You know, why not?
Yeah. But he kisses her initially out of pity, and pity just isn't sexy.
Interesting. So it wasn't... Huh.
I don't want somebody to be hot for me because they kissed me because they felt bad for me.
No,
That's embarrassing, and I don't want that as the foundation for my relationship.
No, that's very fair. I guess I do appreciate, like, because it's not a fake out, make out, right? But I do appreciate this kind of, like, you know, kiss me because I've never been kissed before kind of thing in romance. But I think you're right. The addition of it being pity makes it kind of sours it, right? It's not
a continuation. It's a continuation of Colin viewing Penelope as pitiable.
Right. Okay, well, here's a question. What could they have done if you and I were directing Bridgerton, right? What could they have done to that scene to perhaps play on Colin's burgeoning sense of Penelope as a beauty? Because I think that's what they were trying to do, is not so much have it lean into, like, oh, he pities her, so he's going to kiss her, but that through this training, right? I put quotes around that. He's starting to see her more as someone who is marriageable, right? So they had that whole sequence where she's talking about how beautiful his eyes are. And then it was like, oh, but that's what I would say if you were a suitor. I'm not saying that to you. Ha ha ha. So, like, they are planting these moments that the two of them are having these kind of, like, our friendship barriers being permeated, right? And I think they wanted that kiss to kind of be like, you know, oh, well, the friendship barrier has already been permeated and this just knocked it down all the way. But how could they make that more obvious for you? So it was less pity and more that I'm already starting to be hot for Pen, so of course I'm going to kiss her.
So I think I needed more of Colin's interiority before that moment to know that he was... So I have heard... So Linda Holmes of Pop Culture Happy Hour, who I reference all the time,
of the show.
But she said that in the book version, because you see into Colin's mind, you see his perception of Penelope changing. Okay. So you already know he's already been wanting to kiss her.
Ah, okay. So this is one of those, like, moments of adaptation breaking down a little bit, because he starts to have the dreams about her after the kiss. So we don't really get to see...
You know what? I wish he had dreams about her before the kiss. I actually think that would have fixed it.
I think actually you are right. If he'd been fantasizing about kissing her and woke up in a cold sweat, like, oh my God, why am I dreaming about kissing my bestie? And then she's like, Colin, you've got to kiss me so I don't die unkissed. And he's like, oh, I sure, if you need me to do that for you.
If I must.
If I must, you know, I would never dream of doing such a thing, which honestly is some truth in television, but that's a long story for another day. So I think you're right. I think if he had had dreams in the Ayanni and Corinne cut of Bridgerton season 3, if he had been dreaming about Penelope before kissing her, it would have laid some of that groundwork that his feelings and his thoughts about her were already beginning to change. That's good. I'm glad I asked that question.
Me too. That was a nice moment of revelation.
Yeah,
for us.
Yeah. That was good. That was good. So actually, since we're talking about kissing in dreams, I think this would be an interesting time to think about the intimacy between Pen and Colin, right? Because you said that you had heard that one of the critiques of season 2 was like there was not enough sexy time. That folks were disappointed that it took so long for Kate and Anthony to be intimate with one another, right? So with Pen and Colin, I won't say it felt like it was more fast-tracked, right? But it did feel like they were trying to give us tastes of that earlier. So if we are not as, I'm going to use convinced, right, by Colin's turn towards being in love with Pen, right? Does that impact how we're looking at these kind of moments of intimacy? Because one, yes, that first kiss for you was already deeply impacted, right? Because it was a pity kiss, not a secretly yearning kiss. But then does that change when they are together at the end of season 4, or excuse me, at the end of episode 4 in what I would guess would now be the infamous carriage scene, right? Does it not do it for you? Oh, that sounds weird. That's not what I mean. But like, does it not have the same impact as like the first time Daphne and the Duke were together, or the first time Anthony and Kate were together, or the first time that Charles and Charlotte were together?
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts here.
Please.
One, I think that structurally, that a lot of things in this show were affected by them deciding to split it in half. Because I think the showrunners likely felt pressure to have a sex scene of some kind between Penelope and Colin before the mid-season break.
To kind of wet people's whistles and keep them waiting.
I think that's why the carriage scene is where it is, which is at the end of episode 4.
Interesting.
I also think that for me, when I started the second, I remember like I was not fully convinced, but I was like into the momentum at the end of like part 1. But then when I started watching part 2 and we have the second, I would argue, most impactful sex scene between Penelope and Colin, which is the mirror scene, it's like 10 minutes into episode 5. And I was like, whoa, I need you to warm me up back into this because I need some foreplay, okay?
Right. I was going to say, just go with the whole metaphor. You're right there.
So right before we recorded, I did rewatch the sex scenes, but I started halfway through episode 4 and watched up until like halfway through episode 5. And as a whole, that actually works really well together.
Interesting. So the break kind of stalls the momentum then.
Yeah, the break stalled the momentum for me, at least for me.
The carriage scene was the foreplay. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, and without that, it's like, whoa, Penelope's naked. What?
Okay, so in continuing with the Ayanni and Corinne cut of Bridgerton season 3, what it sounds like is when you have the carriage scene as the finale for the part of this season, it's an end cap rather than a ramp up. And how it worked narratively would have been more of a ramp up, right? And then we get a breather because it's like, surprise, we're engaged. And Eloise is like, I'm going to go have a breakdown. You know, and then, but we're already kind of primed for this to be happening so that when we go to their cute little house, which I assumed was a separate house and not just like another wing of the Bridgerton home that we had.
Yeah, I think it's a separate, it's a separate dwelling.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how these rich people be living. But so when they go to the separate dwelling and then it like picks back up again, we've already been like revved up we already kind of have a sense that it's coming. We haven't had the month-long cool down between.
Yeah, well, because the end of the carriage scene, they didn't. Okay, we will in a moment close read these scenes, I think, or maybe in a part 2 close read these scenes. But at least thinking narratively as the structure, like the carriage scene actually was interrupted. Like they don't have they don't have sex,
right?
Like Penelope gets a hand job, and then they get to Colin's house, and she's like, "Oh fuck, we're here."
I've never heard like someone being fingered like called a hand job, so that's really funny to me. I'm using it from now on. It's added to the lexicon.
Okay. Well, but that like they wanted to keep going, so then it makes sense in that context for them to like for the next day. It is because it is the next day for them to like want to have sex, but it didn't feel like the next day when it'd been a month.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Narratively, it makes sense for them to be like, guys, we're engaged. Okay, we're gonna go over here. Fuck now, you know. But like, when there's a month in between, you don't get that same like the momentum is broken. Yeah, absolutely.
So, those are some of our preliminary thoughts on Penelope and Colin, but we have barely scratched the surface into the sex, love, and romance of Bridgerton Season 3. So, as per usual, when we were recording, we realized we had too much to say. So, we are now going to break and pick back up with Penelope and Colin's sexy time proper in our part 2 episode.
Wait a minute. So we're doing the same thing that Netflix did that we just said was bad to do.
Yes, that was the foreplay. We promise it won't be a month until we drop the second part, though.
Yes, that is true. We will promise that. So in the meantime, if you need your fill of SLL between these 2 episodes, I don't know why you would. Just like click next, like listen to the next one. But you can find us on Twitter. No, that's wrong.
We're not there anymore.
We're not. You can find us on Instagram at SexLoveLit, technically on Threads too. I'm sometimes on over there. Or you can head to our Tumblr at SexLoveLit Podcast. I think those are the places you can find us. You can email us if you want. Sometimes people do. It's actually kind of nice.
Oh, yeah. But if you have burning pollen thoughts that you would like to share, hit us up, mostly on Instagram.
This has been kind of half a Sex Love It episode, but technically a full one.
Look, if Netflix can do it, we can do it too.
Boom. There we go. We're taking our cues from the big studios. But all right, we'll see you in a couple moments on part 2 of our discussion.
All right. Bye.